think judgment is like being able to call BS on things. Like we do this on our colleagues, we do this on the patient. Like everybody, our entire thing is like, do not get fooled. Like, don't get fooled by the system, the test, the patient, like none of these things. Our goal is to like seek the truth at the expense almost of everything else. It's that ability to like call BS or flag when there's something that's abnormal. I think that's really what the clinical judgment is. So our technology goes in, reads the whole medical record, and then packages it and summarizes it. When we present this for the first time, some people always ask us, we're like, well, is it making a diagnosis? And the answer is no. And so then they're like, well, what happens if there's conflicting diagnoses? Great question. It's going to tell you that both are present in the chart. And then that's up to your judgment to decide what is true or false.
Welcome to How I Doctor, where we're bringing joy back to medicine. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Kalie McGuire, an emergency physician turned health tech entrepreneur who now serves as president and chief product officer at Evidently. It's funny to hear myself introduce Kalie in such a formal, official tone because she's also my former ED colleague. We've worked probably, 50, 100 times together, including when she was a resident and I was the attending. I am old, officially. But I also don't want to underestimate Dr. McGuire's incredible knowledge, experience, and success. Kalie's story is probably one that will sound familiar to many listeners. She loves clinical medicine, but after years on the front lines in the ED, she wanted to do more than patch holes in a broken system. That led her from the chaos of the ER to startups, then Carbon Health, a chain of primary care and urgent care clinics here in San Francisco, and now at Evidently, where she's helping design AI tools built around transparency and verification and clinician trust. I'm so excited to talk with Kalie because she brings the perspective of someone who's really been on both sides. I would trust Kalie with my life in the ER, but I'd also trust her to build the software that might make it easier to do that same work in the ER too. Dr. Kalie McGuire, welcome to How I Doctor. Before we jump into the episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Evidently. Evidently is the clinical data intelligence platform built to help physicians harness the ocean of patient data they're drowning in every day. From chart summarization to AI-assisted note drafting and denial appeal support, Evidently makes sure the right data shows up at the right time. Physicians using Evidently report spending less time hunting through charts and more time focusing on patient care. That's why they've become a trusted partner to health systems looking to improve documentation, quality, and revenue sustainability. The company is led by providers and AI researchers that are dedicated to reducing documentation burden and helping clinicians practice at the top of their license. If you want to see what Evidently can do for your hospital or your practice, reach out today at www.evidently.com. Now, let's get into today's episode. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to give a huge shout out to our first ever How I Doctor podcast sponsor, Abridge. Abridge is the leading AI platform that drafts structured, clinically useful notes at the point of conversation. Clinicians remain in full control because they review and finalize every note. With Abridge, many clinicians report reclaiming time and reducing their documentation burden, myself included. I've been using Abridge in my role as a practicing emergency physician in San Francisco, and clinicians who use it report up to an 86% reduction in effort writing notes, a 78% reduction in cognitive load, and 70% decrease in after-hours documentation. The company was also founded by a physician and is completely dedicated to empowering clinicians, which is what makes them the perfect first sponsor for How I Doctor. If you aren't yet using Abridge, inquire with your IT department today or reach out at abridge.com/contact. Thank you, and now let's get to today's episode.
Thank you so much for having me. And that's such a kind intro. I would similarly trust my life in your hands, given that we've worked side by side a number of times, and I've seen the work.
Many, many times. Kalie, you started off in emergency medicine. You did residency here at UCSF. You know, at what point did you realize you wanted to build solutions, not just the ones that were maybe handed to you?
So there was like the inception of like, there's a problem here. And that kind of came in residency. And that was more around like, we had this transplant case where we ended up transplanting somebody that we shouldn't have. And we transplanted them and we couldn't get them off the ventilator because everybody, the entire team of like, dozen plus people had missed the fact that they had some pulmonary hypertension. And it was in the echo report, but for those clinicians listening, it wasn't in the impression.
Oh, wow.
And so
I've never heard this story.
It's it one that like really stuck with me because, it was there. It just didn't get in the impression. And it was just one of those pieces of data that got missed because, you're trying to parse 200 data points and then come up with a plan.
And because transplant patients are so complex, you need to, the transplant folks literally do like the most like invasive look at every organ in their body, because any one extra complication increases the risk of a transplant failure or a massive complication or obviously a death even.
Yeah. Or if you can't get them off the ventilator.
Yeah.
And I remember like that sinking feeling. You and probably all the other clinicians have felt this, but when I was rounding as an intern, we got to this patient's bed and everybody just got withdrawn and like icky. And you could tell that like, it was just like a bad feeling in the room because it was that feeling of like somebody messed up. And, it was just one of those human errors that happen. So that was the first time where I had recognized like, ooh, there might be a problem here.
Yeah, like a needle in the haystack problem.
Yeah.
One little piece of data in a mountain of really important data actually caused just massive downstream problems for, obviously, most importantly, the patient, and then the team, and then the health system, and the transplanted organ, and
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we tried to save one person's lives, and it cost us two.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing where it's just like, you take away from that, like, I never want to feel that way again. And the only tool I had to not feel that way again was for me to like, spend an extra hour reading the chart to make sure I didn't miss one of those critical pieces of information. And in my head, I didn't think there was a better way because, 15 years ago, there wasn't a better way. You just you work harder, try harder, do better.
You read more, you read more, and
take more time. And that was, I'll share it. That was like the story of like something might be wrong here. And then the story of like, I got to fix this was fast forward like maybe 5 years. And I was moonlighting in Central California at a really high acuity place that is very much like the pit. The waiting room was so busy that sometimes the nurses would appropriately order head CTs. And then the only way we would see that those head CTs had been resulted and, had bleeding in them was to walk by a fax machine. And that's when I recognized like technology could either help you do your job or really hinder you. And that was the point where I was like, people are walking around with Google Glass at the time. And I was like, how is that happening over in Silicon Valley? And in the front lines, we have a fax machine with a head bleed and I can't find the patient in the waiting room. And that was really like, there's got to be a better way.
Kalie, those are great stories. I'm just wondering, now that you've been on kind of the tech side for, 5 or 10 years, I wonder if you now look at the tech side and see stuff that you maybe didn't know about the tech side that maybe they assume about the healthcare system, or similar problems on the tech side that like healthcare is actually maybe good at or something like that.
I think from the tech side, the things that healthcare is really good at is processes. So I think like the people and processes, because healthcare has needed to use people and processes to bridge those technology gaps. So we are real good at giving, closed loop communication and codes.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And like sign out, that sort of thing. Like we're really good at that because we can't trust the technology. It hasn't been able to keep up with like the way we practice.
And knowing assigning roles, I could see being the charting nurse knows what his or her responsibility is. The primary nurse knows, the doctor knows, like, hey, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that. And we don't have any confusion about who's in charge of what in maybe a code or resuscitation or something.
And just like a lot of times in software, you can rely on to give you an update. You can put a comment in your code, you can put a little update in your ticket tracking or whatever. But that same functionality doesn't exist in healthcare. So we really rely on a lot of that verbal communication. And when I was actually first transitioning, one of the pitfalls that I had was thinking that everybody communicated like ER doctors do.
Yeah,
which is just, I don't know if you felt this too when you kind of interact in other ways. Like the answer in the ER is yes, no, I don't know. And very rarely it's unclear. But it is rare, like you can't BS your way through it, because if you BS your way into an answer, like people die. And so you learn quickly. Like I tell my residents too, when I train them, I'm like, I do not expect you to know everything. It is impossible. See last needle in a haystack question. But I do need to know where the limits of your understanding is. And when I moved into the tech world, that same like rigor of communication doesn't necessarily exist. So being able to have a culture, and one of the things I'm trying to implement at Evidently and have succeeded so far is really having that sort of really clear culture of like, we work in healthcare, we deal with serious things. Like the answers are yes, no, I don't know. And no room for BS, because this is kind of the world we play in. So that was like a very interesting dynamic of, trust but verify and all of those things.
Kalie, I wonder if there are other things that you've taken from your clinical training or the way that we approach problem solving that is maybe different than tech or has helped you, or you're just aware of like, oh yeah, we totally think about problems in a different way.
I think the interesting thing when I talk to clinicians that are interested coming into technology, some of them will communicate to me. They're like, I don't think I have the skill set sort of thing. I was like, holy smokes, yes, you do. Because the reason I like working in product is because when I'm in the ER, I see a brand new problem, and that's a patient trying to figure out, number one, I have to diagnose them. And then number two, I have to treat them. And there's often a disconnect between what the patient comes in. They say, I have chest pain. And then in your workup, you find out it's actually a gallbladder problem.
Yeah.
So there's discrepancies between what somebody complains about and what we find. And then that treatment is kind of dependent on what we find. Now, pivoting that into the product world, if I'm talking to a customer or I'm trying to design a solution or something and they're telling me, hey, Kalie, I just need a button right here. Can you please put a button right here? And, I'm like, okay, yes, I hear you, but I think what you really need is you need the technology to match your workflow. And you requesting that button is just a signal that it's not matching your workflow. The solution's not give them the button. The solution is give them something that matches their workflow better. And that's one of the big things we try to do at Evidently too, is really augment those workflows rather than trying to replace or automate or, make somebody learn something new. It's like, what is your workflow and how can we make it easier rather than making you learn something brand new? So it's really that problem solving.
Kalie, maybe let's pivot just about your decision to spend more time in the tech world and, less in the clinical world. What did that decision look like to you? What was the way that you thought through that decision in your head? Like, should I do this? And okay, I've decided I'm going to do this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will kind of look at this from the outside and be like, oh, it was like night and day. Really, it was a 10-year transition for me because I really had a hard time. Well, one, I'm risk averse. So I didn't want to like leave a sure thing because, I need health insurance and I'm still paying off my med student loans. It was a hard decision and I'm still kind of like grieving over part of it. But the practical way about how I did it is step one, I had to get rid of a non-compete. And so that meant quitting my full-time job and going to a part-time per diem. And that gave me two things. One, it made me like in the clear to work on things that I could on the periphery that weren't directly related to my full-time job. Because at the time I had a non-compete and wasn't allowed to do both.
At the time, you had in your clinical job, you had a non-compete that said you couldn't do
things that were related to my clinical knowledge on outside endeavors.
Got it, yeah.
So if I had worked for a tech company on medicine things, then, that was technically not allowed.
Got it, okay, yeah.
If I had a real estate business, it'd be fine, but I wasn't interested in that.
If you're baking cookies or something.
Yeah. So it was actually really nice. So I could kind of move my schedule around to be able to kind of match those. I worked on the off hours in emergency medicine, worked in the daytime in tech, and then gradually kind of shifted that proportion of time from, really 80% clinical to then 80% non-clinical. And then finally taking that full-time gig as a non-clinical person. That was like the first jump, but I still saw patients on the weekends and nights and managed it. So it didn't feel like I was really giving anything up too much. But what really changed is a couple years ago, I had my second kid and I could no longer balance working nights and weekends, having two young kids, and a startup. I know. It turns out you have to sacrifice
Kalie, just work harder. Yeah. What's the problem?
Just do more. Yeah. That's the whole mantra the whole time.
Yeah.
So that's really what kind of tipped it.
Well, let me ask you, why continue seeing patients?
Oh, man, I like it.
In that time?
Yeah. It's twofold. One, I like it. Second, it's like downside protection. If something, I have imposter syndrome, right? You're like, you keep thinking like this is going to go away and I'm going to need a backup.
Your backup is, I'm just an emergency physician with, 12 years of training and experience or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's weird to think about it like that. But
yeah, right.
I worked all through the pandemic and stuff. And that I truly felt like this is a calling. Like this is the time when like we need folks like us to kind of like step up and work on the front lines. I think there's definitely a discrepancy on like how that fulfillment kind of comes back. And there's some times when you feel amazing. And even like the scope of humanity that you get to see in the ER, I think it is. I feel like when I'm there, I feel so fortunate because like we really get to be in people's lives, and you really see the scope of all of humanity. Where in the tech world, oftentimes you kind of have a bubble, and the ER is the opposite of a bubble. It is like the leveling field. You have the billionaire next to the homeless person, next to somebody who is having the worst possible day of their life, and it's really equalizing. And it's really nice to have those kind of conversations with people. But it is, I was thinking about bubbles before our talk too. It is a bubble. Silicon Valley is a bubble, and everybody's kind of life merges in the ER. So that it's just a fun environment to be in.
Hey, today's episode is brought to you by Abridge. We all feel the weight of clinical documentation that follows us home and chips away at our personal time. With Abridge, clinicians can change that. Abridge drafts a structured, clinically useful note at the point of conversation, all seamlessly integrated into Epic and customizable to your specialty while you review and finalize every word. Clinicians have reported significantly less after-hours charting, improved satisfaction, and dramatically lower burnout. Let technology support your day instead of interrupting it. Visit abridge.com to learn how you can focus more on patient care and less on paperwork. Let's put the care back in clinical care. A quick word about today's sponsor, Evidently. Their platform turns an ocean of fragmented clinical data into concise, actionable insights. Chart summaries, note drafting, denial appeal support, HCC capture, so you spend time caring, not chasing. A transplant surgeon at a large academic medical center recently took transplant referral review from 2 hours to 20 minutes with AI-assisted chart review from Evidently. Physicians deserve workflows that improve accuracy, reduce exhausting chart biopsy, and help us practice at the top of our license. If you want to see how this might work in your hospital or your department, go to evidently.com. That's evidently.com to get started today. Kalie, let me ask you just kind of some of your opinions on technology and kind of clinician trust. I think you guys are good at that with Evidently. You've said that trust is the cornerstone of clinician adoption. How do you think about building that trust and verification when there's AI, and AI can be incredible, but you want to build a system that has trust at the foundation, at the core?
Trust is just earned. It's not given. And I think it's even more so in clinical medicine. When I first met you, I didn't trust you. I didn't know if you were good attending, bad attending. There are definitely some folks where you're like, that is a terrible idea. And you don't know that until you have been around them for a long time. And the same thing happens with technology. And so the only way to be able to build trust with technology is make one that can earn your trust over time. And the ethos we really try to apply there is being able to have it be traceable. So anything we present you gives you the original evidence. And sometimes it'll point back to that original clinician that maybe made a bad decision or made a great decision. But either way, we don't ask any clinician to trust the technology blindly, because we'll always show you the evidence, and then we preserve judgment. I think that's another thing where a lot of the technology is assuming that like you're going to give away some judgment. And that's one of the things that we really try to prioritize. And it's one of the things that Kai, our head of clinical success, also tries to hone in on, is like, we don't want to take away the mental work that is being a clinician. We don't want to take away your judgment. We want to take away the busy work. And that's the sort of trust that you can kind of earn over time by showing your work and citing your sources the same way we did in school.
Do you have a sense, like, what the hell is clinical judgment? Like, do you have a sense for, I completely agree with you. We do not want to take away clinical judgment, but what is that? Is it a thing that doctors do? Is it choices we make? Is it decisions? Like, what do you think it is that fundamentally is clinical judgment?
Some people describe it as taste, and that's what's going to like preserve. Yeah. And then I think judgment is like being able to call BS on things. Like we do this on our colleagues, we do this on the patient. Like everybody, our entire thing is like, do not get fooled. Like, don't get fooled by the system, the test, the patient, like none of these things. Our goal is to like seek the truth at the expense almost of everything else. And it's that ability to like call BS or flag when there's something that's abnormal. I think that's really what the clinical judgment is. And I'll just give you one example about where this comes up a lot. So our technology goes in, reads the whole medical record, and then packages it and summarizes it. When we present this for the first time, some people always ask us, we're like, well, is it making a diagnosis? And the answer is no. And so then they're like, well, what happens if there's conflicting diagnoses? And I was like, great question. It's going to tell you that both are present in the chart. And then that's up to your judgment to decide what is true or false, because there might be evidence for both. I'll just, as an example, like somebody might have like COPD throughout their entire history. And then they finally go to the pulmonologist, and the pulmonologist is like, no, it's ILD. And so in that patient's chart, you've got evidence of both, but turns out one is true and one is false. But the machine is not going to be the one that tells you which one is true and which one is false. It'll tell you, hey, there's more evidence for X versus Y, but your clinical judgment, Graham, you need to decide, are you going to treat this like ILD or are you going to treat this like COPD? Because both exist and there's discrepant things, and then it's up to the judgment to decide what's true.
I do think of it as like having the ownership or responsibility and combined with like the experience to say like, I don't think this patient needs a CT scan, right? Or I do. I've run verbatim what patients have said to me, obviously without PHI or anything like that, through large language model tools like Claude or OpenAI or Gemini, just verbatim like what they've said. And typically those tools want to do way more tests than I end up doing. That's what the judgment piece is. Like maybe it's almost like the intern or the resident. Like, the intern wants to get a troponin and a lactate and a CT on everybody. And I'm using my attending level judgment when I see the patient to say, hey, I appreciate that you have these concerns about blah, and you want to get these tests, but I'm going to use my judgment, which is like kind of medical training, kind of experience, kind of gut, like it's this amalgamation of all these things to get to this final pathway of like, ding, no, we're not going to do a CAT scan on this patient or something like that.
Did you ever read that book, Blink, by Malcolm Gladwell?
Sure,
Yeah, it almost reminds me a little bit about that. And again, this kind of is separate because it's that like, nope, doesn't look good. Like,
yeah.
I don't know what they look like on paper, but they don't look good. But that's that like, type 1 versus type 2 thinking.
I want to ask you about clinical decision support, because that's a critical piece of like, not stepping on the clinician's toes and not getting into the judgment space, but trying to help them surface information, find information, make better decisions, inform them. Do you have a sense of what common misconceptions are that you hear maybe from colleagues or customers now about AI and clinical decision support?
Around AI, I think there's a big misconception. I think sometimes people bucket things into AI. And like I have a colleague that was like, saying like, I don't like AI is like saying, I don't like applications. It's like some applications are good, some are bad, but like everybody kind of bundles it under AI. And so it's kind of important to figure out, like, are you talking about a predictive model? Are you talking about just like natural language stuff? Are you talking about an LLM? Because all of those are kind of very discrepant things. And there's different levels of trust with each of those too. And so I think when people think decision support, I think in the past, we've always thought about kind of predictive algorithms. We all had that sepsis flag that like, was so wrong sometimes that we all started ignoring it. And then we have these LLMs now, and I think now people are kind of conflating the two because they're thinking, oh, we have this predictive thing, we also have LLMs, and the LLMs are magic, and they're going to show us something, and we won't be able to figure out why they showed us things. What we try to do when I talk to colleagues or customers or people using our product is like, hey, that we can tease out each of these different things. And it is kind of like an orchestration then. It's like, okay, if you have a predictive model, here's where it gets shown. LLMs are great for language. They're going to write your note. They're going to like aggregate a lot of the data, but they're not going to make decisions for you. And it's really trying to like tease apart the different applications rather than like bulking them all together and like throwing things at the wall and hoping it sticks. It's really kind of being more of I'm trying to like describe this like in a meaningful way, but it's more like a cockpit. You have different tools and different levers for you to pull, and they all kind of do different things rather than lumping them all together. So with decision support, I think there's multitudes of different ones. Like one of them is just flagging like, hey, this patient actually is a high risk for developing X, Y, and Z. That's a form of decision support. But for the other decision support where it's like, hey, give me a flag, show me where their high risk is. Like if you know that they have a unsafe water history in that zip code, but you have to match the zip code to the patient, to the issue to be able to have an intervention, that's the kind of decision support that is like killer. And it's very discernible about why it got flagged. But it's those are some of the misconceptions of like bulking it all together and thinking it's a big mystery when really when it's applied in the right way, it's not mysterious, or it shouldn't be mysterious.
I mean, take the cockpit analogy. Physicians are kind of overseeing a system that's running more on autopilot than it is today, and they are double checking and overseeing things as opposed to, and for the critical parts of the patient's flight, the takeoff and the landing, the physician is involved. Like, is that your vision of where things are in 5 or 10 years?
So I think there's one version where it is very much autopilot and we're supervising. I think that's great for urgent care and for people that have like one issue going on. There's an alternate reality where we end up having technology that serves as kind of a coach for us. So we're still making the decisions, but it's like a second set of eyes where it's like, hey, doc, it looks like you missed X, Y, and Z. And so really it's more of a coach and a second set of eyes and somebody that tees up everything for you to make you maximally efficient. It's like having that best resident you ever worked with that was trustworthy, that made you like 10x more efficient. The meta thing here is like, where is the industry as a whole? Like, are we even going to have enough clinicians to operate in the coach model, or are we going to get forced to operate in the supervising model? And I think that's kind of remains to be seen, because if we continue to have less and less and less clinicians, then the coach, like getting an AI coach, is going to be a luxury, not the norm. Whereas I think we'll get more automation, but I don't know that automation is the best application of this technology. And evidently, we actually fully believe it's more augmentation than automation.
Yeah. I think that the challenging thing to me that I've kind of come to is there probably is a significant role for automation and augmentation, and that probably like the right thing to do in 80% of the time is to follow some order set algorithm pathway. And then 20% of the time, the right thing to do is actually to actively not use the order set, to actively like veer from it, because whatever, there's something nuanced about the presentation, they have some risk factor, they're on some medicine. And I think the challenge is knowing if the patient in front of you is part of the 80% or the 20%.
Yeah, I'm fully aligned with you there. I think there's like a number of experiences that come to mind here, but it does come back to that clinical judgment, because what you're describing is like, I need to be able to call BS on the standard algorithm. And I think that's one end of the extreme. And I think the other end of the extreme is for GDMT and heart failure, it's 4 medication pillars. I think the compliance rate of that is something like 25%. But the number needed to treat if you are compliant with GDMT, the number needed to treat to prevent a hospitalization, I think, is 3, and to prevent a death is 4. Like, it is such a no-brainer. It is so common. It is not new, and yet nobody, like less than 1 in 4 patients are actually treated along those guidelines. So I think that goes to your most of the time people want to be treated by those guidelines, but there are those that then fall out of those.
Yeah, I struggle with this a lot. I think if you saw that only 25% of people are on, quote unquote, the right therapy, I think like the healthcare system and maybe the insurance system, the payers, you would say like, doctors, what are you doing? Like, you don't know what you're doing. And then if you're on the other side, if you're the doctor practicing, you can also come up with like maybe good reasons. Maybe you would call those reasons. Maybe someone else would call those excuses. Knowing, what the right amount of variance should be. It's probably not right to have all 100% of people on all 4 of those medicines, but it's probably higher than 25%. Kalie, let me ask you a little bit about entrepreneurship and the tech industry as well. I think even before you were at Carbon, you co-founded a company in the credentialing space. And, I think the thing that physicians are really good at is seeing all the problems in the healthcare system. I mean, I feel like you can't work a single day and be like, I've identified yet another thing that is a problem for me or my patient or whatever. But the question I want to ask you is like, how did you decide that that problem, like credentialing, was the problem that was worth like starting a company?
I think it was a combination of both because I felt it. So, and for those of you that aren't familiar, credentialing is like trying to remember your Geico number from when you were 16 and putting it on a form that you then have to fill out every time you get a new job. And then you got to
At a new
at a new
hospital.
hospital. And then you got to
And
wait.
it's a many month long
Yeah.
process where you have to like prove that you graduated high school
Yeah.
even.
Yeah. And all your prior insurance coverage for every hospital that you've ever worked at and every patient you ever touched. And then you wait 9 months to get a decision that they have appropriately checked all of your stuff. And so I was at a Christmas party and all of my residents or prior residents who were all attendings now had just gone through this process, usually more than once because we had all just gotten a job. And it was just one of those things where it was like, yes, it was painful. Two, it was impacting the supply side of the equation, meaning like if you can't get a job as a clinician, that means your patients can't, let's just say you're the only GI specialist around. And you get hired by the hospital that needs you. And it takes them 9 months to get you to see a patient. That means in 9 months, you got patients that don't have colonoscopies, don't have GI scopes, like true like access problem. And it between that problem being very obvious to me and then seeing like, this is just a form, guys. Like, this is like, we have Apple
this
Wallet.
is paperwork.
This is paperwork.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is like a perfect application of technology to solve this problem. So it was that kind of constellation where I was like, okay, obvious problem, maybe not a huge market, but very obvious problem and a very obvious solve. Those are the kind of things where I was like, oh, this is going to be a nice tangible thing for me to try to like take a crack at, basically.
Yeah. Do you have advice for physicians who are maybe thinking of making a startup? What do you think the best approach is specifically for a doctor that wants to try this?
What worked for me is just understanding the problem very deeply because I lived it. And then it was like, okay, I knew the problem. And then I had to fill in the knowledge gap about the solution part. And the solutioning was, okay, I need to figure out this whole tech thing. And for me, that meant exposure to the ecosystem and then frankly, teaching myself how to program to be able to better communicate things and then learned how to program, learned how to like operate in that ecosystem and really figure out what tools were available to kind of solve the problem. And then I had to layer on the business knowledge, the startup knowledge and all of that. And so that was kind of a stepwise like knowledge gathering for me. And I kind of each way along the side was like, okay, here's the new gap. And like an academic person, I went and tried to fill that gap with like, is there a course? Is there knowledge? Is there an audiobook? Is there any of those things I tried to use? And then turns out networking is also one of those great ways to fill some of those knowledge gaps because you just need to learn from folks that have already done it before. So I kind of like went along the way of like, find the problem, it hit home, hit me right here. And then moved about how to solve it.
Yeah. Kalie, move fast and break things, or honestly, move fast and try things works well in tech and software. But you and I know there's how that could go with patient care.
It might not work. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you like balance that like innovation, speed, and then like the safety and the rigor that is demanded by medicine as well?
That's where you just need to put rails around it. It's like, where can we move quickly? Where is it not going to hurt anything? Where's the downside? Because I'm always thinking about like, what's worst first? I assume everybody's going to die. Everyone went to the ICU and never came home. But that's how I think about technology too. I'm like, okay, so worst case scenario, if we ship something quickly here, where is the downside? And then if the downside is minimal, I might somebody might have a different way of documenting or viewing something. It's not going to cause a treatment issue. It's not going to cause a patient harm issue. That's where we can kind of push the envelope a little bit. But if there's something that's going to be a real patient safety and like issue or like potentially have harm, that's why I really put on the brakes. And we still internally, we ship a lot of things really quickly. It's just we hold it back until we do enough QA to make sure that like this is solid. It's going to be definitely non-inferior and hopefully. I mean, when I worked on the EHR, that's a very different workflow than working on at Evidently, which is workflow centric and a tool for assisting rather than like the patient record and ordering. Like I did the EHR at Carbon and I did on Evidently as a tool, and the differences there are stark. And then when people are complaining about their EMRs and the innovation, I was like, well, the stakes are much, much higher for an EMR. So I get it. And that's probably appropriately slower because they have a different sort of rules that they have to follow appropriately.
Yeah. Kalie, maybe in the last few minutes, I got some quick hits for you.
All right.
If you don't mind. One piece of advice you'd give physicians thinking about leaving full-time clinical medicine.
Take a risk. I would say go for it. Like it's don't be a turd. That's like the advice. Be honest.
Wait, what does that mean?
Just
don't be a turd.
Be honest with your team about why you're leaving and like what the issues are, if there are any issues. But everybody always worries about like closing a door and never being able to come by. I think every job that I have left has been usually like under very transparent terms, and it's never resulted in a closed door. It's always been like, totally understand, Kalie, like let us know if anything changes. So the folks that are worried about closing a door and like burning a bridge, as long as you're not a turd, you're probably not going to burn any bridges. So, just be an upstanding human.
Don't be a turd.
Don't be a turd. Words to live by.
Evidently's new tagline. Yeah.
Don't put that as like the social media tag. Big takeaway. Don't be a turd.
Yeah. Kalie, a lesson from emergency medicine that still shapes how you lead.
Closed loop communication. Like, I love that. Yeah.
A tech tool or workflow habit that has made your life easier, whether it's in work life or personal life.
I love my meeting notes. I also ask it to do summarization of like meeting notes and then power other things. So that's what I really like. If I'm having a product discussion, I can also be like, okay, draft a PRD or something for me. So I love my meeting note taker.
So you'll have it take the notes and then summarize them, and then you can even have that then export to like turn it into a to-do list or who agreed summarize what the next steps are and assign tasks or something.
Yeah, even more than that though, I can say like, hey, draft me a product requirement document after this discussion. So I actually take the transcript and then like use it for more than meeting notes. I'm like, okay, we were talking about this thing, but like instead of just creating the notes, like let's go a step farther and
turn what we were talking about into a theoretical product.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And lastly, one thing you wish every technologist, tech bro, tech gal, whoever it is, understood about doctors.
I don't know about understood, but I wish they would come and shadow us. Like, just come live the experience because you think you know until you're there. And it's seeing is not like, I don't know, seeing is believing. So if you think you know, go and actually see it and then help solve the problem.
Love it. Dr. Kalie Dove McGuire, thank you for being here. An honor to talk with you, have you as my colleague in emergency medicine. Excited for all the work you're doing with Evidently.
Thank you so much, Graham. And don't call me doctor because I'm only in trouble. That's like, whenever I get called doctor, I know that I'm in trouble by one of the nurses usually.
Kalie, thank you so much for being here.
So good to talk to you, Graham. Anytime.
Yeah, likewise.